how to do earthworks in the rainy season. Hey, this is Justin Hitt from Prosperity Homestead. We have a question from one of our subscribers, how to do earthworks during the rainy season. See, earthworks very often manage erosion, which manages the issues of rain, extra water on the soil, runoff, management of nutrients. But very often, as a busy individual with a small farm, homestead, or estate, you very often have a full-time job, and you don't necessarily have equipment out to do this work or equipment available. Because a lot of times at this scale, it's not really worth an excavator's time to come out and dig a swale or to dig a mound if they may not even know what this is. And you can do one of two things. You can save up all your earthworks projects till you can come out and have an excavator do it all at one time. And that would mean a larger project. It would mean working with a smaller scale until you can bring in soil or you can bring in the equipment. And very often it means that when you work with your earthworks, that you must work to completion each section of earthworks. So I've worked on a number of earthworks on this property after we cleared trees, and right now it's pouring down rain outside. And I worked on something last night, and the biggest thing that was in my mind is how do I get this? It was a kind of a check swale, kind of had a deep swale basin and then a mound on the backside. How do I get this to a point where if it rains, I'm going to have a stable system? So you want to work in phases, and you want to work for stable systems. Now, you can put a drain in your swale to bypass a soft mound, because once you dig this mound, whether it's a piece of equipment or you out there with a shovel, you will have soft soil that's easily saturated with water and can be moved easily. And no sense spending 2.5 hours digging a hole to have a rain come along and just wash away the system. So I'm going to give you a little outline about what I do. First off, it's okay to dig swales and drainage ditches in the rainy season. In fact, the rainy season is both the best test and the best measure of your water management systems. So there will be times that after a rain event or even during a rain event, you're going to be out there with a shovel cleaning up a swale, a trench. We have a Y connector for an underground drain system that actually burst out. And I saw water coming up out of the ground. I was walking around with my raincoat on, walking the dog in the rain, and I see water kind of bursting up out of the ground. And I put the dog back, tried to dry it off, came back outside, got a pickaxe out, and started digging a hole to try to figure out where's this water coming from. And it turns out it's a connector that has failed over time. It had roots in it and other things, and now water is going everywhere. So literally, I'm digging a swale in the rain. Now, it's a swale, trench, channel type thing. It's only about 2 feet wide, probably about 2 foot deep, has a mound on the bottom. But ultimately, you may have to dig some of these out in the rain, because what you don't want is for an erosion event to cause more damage than it's worth. We have an area behind a rental property where some kids ran up and down this hill, and it caused the hill to fail. And I had to... still haven't got the repairs done on it, but it's now the rainy season. I had to go out there before the rainy season and do triage using each new rain event to see whether or not the triage is working the way we expect it, and then to ultimately get it to a point of stability. So working with earthworks during the rainy season is not ideal, but it's often very necessary. And so what you're going to do is you're going to work each section to completion. So instead of doing a 30-foot long or a 60-foot long swale, you might dig out the first 15 feet, but get your survey markers in place for the rest of the area, and then on the ends have an overflow relief so that you can relieve it of water and keep your work going. If you're going to dig out a long trench for something, make sure it's on contour. Make sure you dig it deep enough that it can hold the water, even if you don't have a fully compacted mound on the back end. Be aware of your flow back. So your swales have a mound downslope. That mound has to be tall enough that water would not accumulate behind it and go over the mound. See, swales and mounds are soakage systems, not dams, and they're not constructed to hold a large amount of water for a long period of time. So digging a swale, it would be better to dig it as long as you can make it on your contour, but make the mound as low as possible with a relief on either end. It's kind of a spillway on either end. That way you can spread that water out for the maximum length and then overflow it and isolate where you might have channeling or other types of damage caused by the rains. In the case where you do get damage, because after every rain event, I take a walk about the property, and I recommend you do the same, and when I find damage, I actually do the repairs immediately. Now, often you can't walk on a mound that has recently, after a rain event, it's too soft. Also, if you have big trees on a mound, they'll fall over. So it's kind of, you go around and get a punch list together, and then you come back and do your maintenance as soon as it dries up. Now, in the Mid-Atlantic region, starting in August through October is our rainy season. So if we don't get snow, we'll definitely get rain. And just in the last 48 hours, we've gotten 6 inches of rain. So 1 inch of rain on 1,000 square foot is 600 gallons of water. Now, this is the perfect time to be restoring the aquifers, to be capturing that water in cisterns to use in the summer season, because prior to this, it was a couple weeks of 100-degree temperatures and no rain. But ultimately, what we're doing is we are observing the land so that we know where these swales, where these earthworks will go into best use. So again, you may not be digging a swale during a rainy season. You might not be doing any earthworks during the rainy season. A lot of heavy equipment operators won't even go out on the ground during the rainy season because they'll get their equipment stuck. But you might be surveying, you might be designing, you might be observing to see where the water already flows. You might be troubleshooting by doing small catch basins, by doing small drainage trenches. And you may be also planning and adjusting, starting from your zone 1 around the house and working your way out across the property, figuring out ways to keep moving that water away from your house, but into usable systems. So, for example, even though it's raining, it might be a great time to trench around your raised beds, because if you get a couple dry days, you can trench around the raised beds. You can cover the soil. So in the rain, you don't want any exposed soil. You can cover the soil with straw or some other kind of mulch, and then those trenches can be filled with wood chips. The rain will come, soak up in those wood chips, and start battering the water that you need now for the fertility of those beds. So you would be actually adjusting the earth, adding biomass, and also putting down seed and other things. And then you are now preparing for that winter season where you might have snow on the earth, which snow is just frozen water. But if you don't have a snow season, you're going to have those rains. So you'll be adjusting the water runoff issue by, the trench is full with wood chips. The water doesn't move. It just soaks. Trenches on level or swales on level, they just are soakage systems. Now you're going to soak up more of that water into the soil, but you're doing it along with your growing spaces, so you'll actually end up with a more kind of a more moist soil. You don't want mud, but you'll have a more moist soil. You'll start building in that organic material. You'll start working the earth. And in many cases, the rainy season is the best time to do earthworks because the soil is easier to manage. Clay soils take at least an inch of water before you can have 4 inches to 7 inches of movable depth. These bench terraces that we have here, the tops are stable for a 70,000-pound dump truck. Well, guess what, folks? That's awful hard dirt. I couldn't even use a post hole digger to dig holes for trees. That's one of the reasons we are actually digging some of these swales to build a mound that I can start putting small trees in. If I can't dig a hole to put in a big tree, I can dig a hole to put in a smaller tree. Now, of course, you can get equipment, but understand the equipment moves more soil, it moves it faster, and without the proper design, the rain events will cause a tremendous mess. We have videos of sites where they've done tree removals and then they didn't properly grade. And then after the first rain, you end up with trenching. You end up with a lot of soil loss, especially that humus, organic topsoil. That'll run right off because it's light. The water will lift it up. You'll have clay compaction where grass won't grow. And you'll have a lot of other problems. Another concern you need to worry about when you are doing your earthworks is to don't cover them with so much straw that it's matted. Now, you can mat straw on a garden bed that already has organic matter in it. But if you've just disturbed the soil, so you scraped away the topsoil, now you're working with subsoils, which include clay, which include a little sandier soil. You don't want to put too much straw on that, because what will happen is as you add the additional layers, so you've dug something out, you've done one layer, you've got maybe the mound is maybe a foot tall. You're going for 3 foot, but right now you've got a shallow swale and a foot tall mound, and it's stable. And now you put down a little bit of straw, and if you put too much straw, that next layer of materials will actually shift. So you want to put very little straw down on top of that, because we want to protect the soil from the sun. We want to protect the soil from heavy rains, but you want to put very, very little soil. In fact, you would rake off that straw, and you'd rake off any topsoil you put on before you put that next mound in. But here's the good news. Here's the takeaway. If you must do earthworks in the rainy season, you don't have to water anything. Everything's going to be well hydrated. If you work each phase of work creating stable systems, and then you put down some seed and you put down some light straw, those are low-cost things. It doesn't cost much to put down a little bit of grass seed and a little bit of straw. Well, if you can't get back to the earthworks, it's going to be well watered in, it's going to be stable, and it's going to start building that stability with the grasses. Remember, all of our earthworks get planted immediately, even if they're not finished. But if you know you've got a foot high and you want to get to 3 feet high, and you might be bringing in dirt, you might be digging deeper, you don't want to put your trees in. But it's not going to hurt anything to get some grass growing on that. In a few days in the rainy season, you can very often get grasses and clovers growing. And then in that next layer of soil, all it takes is to rake off that material and then put that next layer of soil in it, tamp it down, get to your next stable level, and then do the same thing again. Put your straw back on it. You're going to have a little bit of straw from before. You put your seeds back down on it. You put some topsoil back on it. And before you know it, the swale, the system, it looks like it's finished. Now, what you don't want to do, and this happens very often, is you don't want a bunch of muddy holes in your property. You don't want a bunch of dirt everywhere running all over your yard. You don't want a bunch of water and soil running off into creeks and running off into hardscapes. These are the things that are going to cause problems. And that's why, again, the best recommendation I can give you when it comes to earthworks in the rainy season is to finish each earthwork to its best capacity. It might mean that you got to scale it way down. It might mean that, you wanted 125 foot long, you saw Jeff Lawton walking around in the 125 foot long deep swale with the 6-7 foot mounds on the side of it. And you just would love to have that, but you really ought to start with maybe a 2 foot high. And, you can still go to 125 feet, but your mound's only going to be 2 foot high because you got an excavator in for the days that you can get them in there. And, if you couldn't get the right size equipment, or you ended up having to dig it out with hand tools, you at least at the end of that activity have a finished soil stable earthwork system that can start working for you right away. That is the key. Erosion management, access, planting systems. Start it right now. Start it where you are. And bring it to a stable level so that if you do get a rain event, or if you do get called away or distracted doing something else, that this thing works. And it works the way it's supposed to. It may not be as big as you wanted it to be. It may not be as grand as you want it to be. It may not be the system I'm digging right now. I wanted 2 of these on the hill. I'm only going to dig one right now, get it finished, and then I'll dig the next one later. I start at the highest elevation. Always start your highest elevation, and that way, as you stabilize your highest elevations, the next rain event will soak in, and you won't have the erosion problems that we talk about in other programs. That's what you've got to do. You can do earthworks in the rainy season. It's always best to work into the rainy season, and it's always best to finish each phase with a stable earthwork or a stable swale or a stable environment that prevents erosion, that gets it back under grass or planting systems, and then ultimately keeps that soil covered. Thanks for listening. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. If you have any questions about your small farm, homestead, or estate using permaculture, natural farming, or other ecologically sound methods, visit us at www.prosperityhomestead.org. Thanks for listening.